Connie that, Maria mentioned earlier that, she's admirable and respectable and just lovable. So thank you for being with us today, Connie.
Thank you. And thank you, beloved community. It's so beautiful to be with you today. For those that happen to be in Santa Barbara, we are experiencing a lovely Santa Barbara morning, uh, and no fog and none of that, just sunshine. So first I want to begin by really saying Happy Father's Day to all the fathers. Happy Father's Day to all the uncles, to all the godfathers, and those that just love our children and walk in that very special space that hosts that spirit of fatherhood, that spirit that we need, that brings us comfort, that brings us joy, that brings us accountability. I certainly appreciate that about fathers, that they can. And I was so blessed to have an amazing father who walked this walk of ministry for many years of his life and gave his time and his love to his community. He moved to Baton Rouge as an adult and began to pastor there. And so just know what a beautiful role that men play in our community. And thank you, Maria, for the things that you shared about the way in which particularly Black men are and have to walk in this world. But they do walk in joy as well. And I appreciate our brothers that walk in joy and that they can share that with all and share that love with all, which is so much of what we need. So I'm going to share my screen a little bit. Let's see if I got it right. Oh, don't got it right. Let's see. So I am going to begin with sharing. You meet people and you want to know where did they come from? How did they get to where they are? So I begin with this scripture because it is really one of my favorites. And it is from the book of Romans, also one of my favorite books. And it is that call to say for people who are and attuned to faith, here is the way in which we know we can walk. For I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jew first and also to the Greek. For in it the righteousness of God is revealed from faith for faith, as it is written, the righteous shall live by faith. And when I think about my own personal journey and testimony, that is the beginning of that for myself, of being called to faith and to faith community at a very young age. My mother used to tell the story that I was probably about 9, and I came in the kitchen one day and declared to her that I was going to be following Jesus Christ, and I just wanted her to know that. And she said, well, good for you, honey. Thanks for sharing, But she said, you were so cognizant and resident that this was where you were headed and what you were going to do. And she said, for me, it was the most beautiful moment because as a parent that's wanting to raise your child in faith, to think that the child just declared themselves, you say, okay. And then you just walk along with that journey. I was raised in San Francisco Bay Area, actually in San Francisco proper. And it was during the 1970s. And that was a time in particular in the 1970s that a lot of movements came out of the Bay Area. You had what was going on in the East Bay and Oakland with the Black Panthers. You had so many, the LGBTQ community, you had so many movements that came out of that. But the grounding of all of it was a call for inclusion and equity. And so what I love about this scripture, that it says that it is for all of us, and it grounds us in the equity of what's available to us, that we can live in this, that salvation is to all, and this righteousness of that, if we say, this is the way I'm going to walk, this is the way I'm going. And so for me, This has been the grounding of my own life and of my own faith journey in this way. So this morning, I want to share a little bit with you. Part of this for me has been why this particular way. So about 14 years ago, almost 15 years ago, I had the opportunity to start Gateway Educational Services with Audrey Gamble, who's on this call today too. And really, if you ask, why did you start that, or why did we start that? It was really about answering a call for access and equity for all children. I think of myself as an activist, and the vehicle that it was chosen to be able to act that was education, and has been education. And most recently, the call came that it was time to help revive the NAACP in Santa Barbara. So much has happened in all of our communities, and the need for a place that we could have justice is and what's going to be happening next with the NAACP, and I'm looking forward to that. So if I was going to say what it is that we're going to talk about a little bit, I want to talk about today, it's about this time in our lives, in our space, that we are standing in a gap. Those called through faith and how you want to live, it's an interesting time to be called right now to be in a gap. So I'm going to talk about today a little bit about standing in that gap. This is one of my favorite quotes of my life. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. And when you start to step in the gap, you understand this power of love, because love is the ultimate thing that can move. I had an interesting conversation the other day with a reporter, and those are always interesting conversations to talk to reporters, because you're not really sure what they're really trying to get to. But I think what she was really trying to get to was, hey, you know, uh, all the things that's happened. She wanted to say that, Black Lives Matters, that's kind of one and done, right? Like that's kind of over. Uh, and I'm not really sure why they wanted to do all that in the first place. It was a very interesting conversation. And what I shared with her was that this is continuation where we are. It's a continuation, all pieces being connected to each other. And if you are Black in America, every generation that we have been a part of has had to take this stance to figure out exactly where you were going to be in this gap, whether or not you would move that forward, whether or not you would understand that calling. And so I said to her, I said, I love and embrace absolutely everything that has come, because I see it makes me happy, it makes me smile to think that this generation is figuring out for themselves how they're going to move. It's unfortunate that we have to continue to go this way. We have to continue to figure out, but actually, it will free people to move through the moment, to move through, to come through the gap. It brings you to another side. What I hope is that people will move in it and be embraced through love, because love is what sustains as you move through the gap and as you have those experiences. And so I did help our reporter to understand that this is not a moment, it's a continuum, that this is based in love, it's based in community. One of my most favorite moments, hard moment, but tragic moment at the same time, was to watch John Lewis stand in Washington, D.C., in the Black Lives Matter square, and to watch him physically pass the torch, right? And to see him do that, it was a beautiful but tragic moment, we know, and he knew that his time here with us was not long. But is that particular piece. So standing in the gap is where I want us to be today, to think about. Juneteenth is such a beautiful opportunity for freedom. I loved this image of the woman with her hands spread out, because it reminds me that it is also through these movements that our sisters come to stand in this space. I was so blessed to have incredible grandmothers, both, or three actually, incredible grandmothers, to help me be able to understand these freedoms. One of my grandmothers was from Texas, And we called her our yellow rose of Texas. She loved roses, and she had her whole garden was yellow and white and pink roses. And because yellow roses is the state rose of Texas, and we called her our yellow rose. But it is this piece that I think about every single day, that women in particular have called and have been in this space to continue to move our communities, to continue to mark where we are going and the process and the teaching that comes. So my yellow rose of Texas during Juneteenth would often, because she moved to Fresno as I was a little one, because she had retired. And boy, let me tell you, Fresno is a very hot place in the month of June. But the community of women, it's a hot place in the month of June, but the community of women there would gather, and they would cook, and they would tell stories, and they would sing and pray and help us to understand that it was that connection that broke those chains, not always physical, but spiritually, the breaking of chains. And our grandmothers would always say, you must break the spiritual chains, because that is all that's left. The physical chains had been broken, but what's mostly standing in our way is the spiritual and emotional and mental chains. And so I wish you on this Juneteenth beautiful day that you experience not just the freedom and be remembered, but you experience that emotional and that development and what comes from that, and what can happen from that. And so I loved this image. I had to put it in here this morning. I may make it into a poster or something, put it on my wall, just because it just was such a beautiful, beautiful way to think about, arms stretched, how we embrace love, how we embrace one another. When I think about Juneteenth and I think about where we're at, I also remember that coming out of slavery, we had nothing. Black folks walked out with nothing. And for the next 75 years, endured being sharecroppers in many of those states until we began to migrate. But I often think walking out with nothing but their family and going to reunite with family was about this freedom. There's so many stories about those who, from those moments, went on to try and find family and make reunification such an important part of what's happening and what was going on. And so that gap of family is also filled as we remember these times and these dates, that gap of family being that is filled in us. There was always a question of how long before freedom comes. That was a big part of, I think, what was going on for people. And I want to share this little scripture with you. And it's from the book of Nahum. And it says, and now I will break his yoke from you and burst your bonds apart. Behold, upon the mountains, the feet of him who is bringing good news, who publishes peace. Keep your feast, O Judea. Fulfill your vows, for never again shall the worthless pass through you. He is utterly cut off. And I always think about this promise, because there's always messengers. And when you're called and your life says it's time to be a messenger, those messengers bring words of freedom. And I think about the yoke and the yoke being broken, that literally and physically held us down, and that yoke being broken and then being called to good news. It's amazing to me always that when I spend time, the more time I spend in the African American community and with older community members, how well they understand and carry this about understanding the breaking of that binds us, and that they live by this, that they have moved past it, that is their prayer life, that is their gift to us, that we break away from that yoke. And so this promise of how long till freedom comes. I don't know how many of you have heard the story of the comet of 1861. So in 1861, there was a comet that was clearly seen. And the first time I heard the story, it just brought me to tears. There was a comet that could clearly be seen in the sky from June 30th to July 1st, 1861. And astronomers believed that it had actually appeared 400 years earlier, but in its cycle as a comet, in that time, it appeared. And it was so bright in the sky that there was no place that you couldn't see it. And there are accounts of people writing about the comet. In fact, people writing about the comet who were from the Confederate side on their ships and boats, and they could see it. You could see it from practically everywhere. And so I always imagine, and it hit me so hard when I heard about it. I was like, wait, a 400-year comet, and it showed at that moment. And there was something in me that said, I imagined those who were in that moment enslaved, those in that time that were fighting for freedom because we were the Civil War, that somehow or another they looked at that, and there must have been some thoughts about freedom. There must have been some prayers about freedom, that perhaps that was a sign, that was a sign that would mark itself. And there was something about the comet, in the way that the stories have been told, and the astronomers told the story, that it particularly looked north. So the way that it illuminated itself was in an illumination towards north. Almost everywhere you were, the position that it was coming past Earth would flank you to look north. And knowing how much enslaved people thought about looking north for freedom, I thought, wow, what a remarkable thing. So we don't hear the story about this comet very often, but what a remarkable thing. And I imagine the prayers that went out. And it brought me to tears in that moment when I heard about it, because I thought their prayers went out. And some lived to see that, others didn't. But I also know that the prayers were answered for freedom in me. The prayers are answered for freedom in you. We are the inheritance of those prayers. See, prayer does not go in a way that prayer is never answered. We think short term. We're kind of short term people, you know. We go, oh, I didn't get it right away. But prayers never go unanswered. And so that looking for people there, knowing that those prayers will be answered. I feel it every day, that I am the embodiment of the answer to some ancestor of mine, who I don't know if she was calling on God. I don't know if she was calling on Allah. She was just calling to the heavens and asking for the freedom that would bring her family and her children forth. And somewhere I know my ancestors looked into that sky during those dates, and they called upon heaven for freedom. And here I am able to be today, that very, very embodiment of their freedom, that they moved on. And so we are always called and see messengers of the freedom. We get annoyed when we don't get the immediate freedoms that we believe that we should have. But sometimes we have to know there's a flow to this, that it doesn't always come in that very moment you think it's supposed to come, but there's a flow to this. And so I think about all the different messengers of freedom and the messengers around us. And sometimes the messengers are 10 years old, and sometimes the messengers are 90 years old, but there are messengers all around us that continue to point us towards freedom. I came upon this quote a few months back, and it really embodied something for me about nonviolence. The NAACP is an organization that was founded on nonviolence. And so I love this quote. The insight at the heart of nonviolence is that we live in a tragic gap, a gap between the way things are and the way we know they might be. It is the gap that never has been and never will be closed. If we want to live nonviolent lives, we must learn to stand in that tragic gap, faithfully holding the tension between reality and possibility, in the hopes of being open to a third way. The NAACP's call is to be in this very gap, to be in this space. But our call is also for everyone, all of us every day, to think about the fact there's times that you are literally holding those two spaces. You can sometimes be in places where you feel that there are the possibilities and the way things are. I often feel this as I am in spaces with our younger community organizers, whom I adore and love. And I feel the push. They want to push fast towards what they see as possibility. But here we are, still in the moment that we got to deal with the mess that's in here, that there's mess in here. And somehow we got to hold between because we're looking for the third way. What exists sometimes has failed us. Early on, you guys there was a reading there that talked about the time in which Black folks were literally defined. I think we're the only group ever defined in the Constitution at that time. So they felt necessary to give us a definition to be 3/5 of a human. So imagine moving from 3/5 of a human to full citizenship, to full access to everything, but not everything, that all being there. And so here they were making their way out of slavery through this gap, that through faith, as in Romans tells us, through faith to know that we could get there. When I think about the uplifting of our community, I love this quote too. It says, "The third way is not a path of heroism that's reserved for certain people." Yes. Sometimes we think, oh, it has to just be the heroes out there. It's not the everyday people. But that the third way is reserved for the likes of Gandhi and King. Like we're just looking for those people. No, no. That it can and must be walked like through mortals like you and me. And my quote to that too was that every day, we are everyday people bound by love, committed to creating extraordinary things. That somehow or another, we stop to say, I know it, that we are in this gap. I know that I see this, but I take the time through love to be bound in community towards what is extraordinary. And it is looking forward to the extraordinary that's here. We don't know what the extraordinary is. It's coming. It is just our place to open it. It is just our place to be open to what will be extraordinary and to not get in our own way. So steps to what is nonviolence. And I am hoping that this will be our message and where we will be with the NAACP in Santa Barbara and even other organizations, I hope too. That what do you need to come to these steps of being that kind of agent of change? First of all, a sound rationale for what we intend to do. The clarity that is necessary when we lead, to be able to give to others, to say what it is based on. It is based on love for me. Love is simple and it's clear. Love is also that it keeps us accountable to ourselves, keeps us accountable to one another. And the rationale to move ahead to say the equity that all deserve, that love that all deserve, is what I will move through with intention. It has to be that which feels sensible. I was so blessed to be with very sensible parents, very sensible mom, very practical mom, who often would, if you were kind of going the wrong direction, it wasn't a no so much as just questions to ask if you had really thought that through. And what will be your outcome over there today? My mom would often say, and your outcome for this would be what? Because it was that call, it was that way of her saying, reevaluate which way you're going to do that. She would often say she had a way to respond to whatever I had chosen, but she would be responding, but she wanted to give me that moment to think about whether or not this was the strategy in which I would go down that road. And Black mothers in particular have a special way of doing this with their children. But it is the beauty of that we carry the rest of our lives with that sound reasoning and strategy. And I thank God that she was that way. We also need to have that which is an active and supportive community. The pandemic really pushed us into different spaces of what's community, but it also pushed us into spaces as community to be more involved. The last few months, now things have kind of opened back up. I keep bumping into people and they say, "Oh, yeah, I was in a Zoom room with you." I keep laughing because I don't know how many Zoom rooms I must have been in, but I must have been in a lot of Zoom rooms because I keep bumping into people that I didn't know before. And so the access that exists, you don't know what that access might be. So take the access to create community. And I am looking forward to creating more community for us and more interface of community here in our region. We need more, we need each other, and we need to be in those spaces. So take that moment in that time. And that's what I hope that we do as a part of the NACP, is that we create that active and supportive community, and listen. Listening also helps us as we go to create community. And invitation is also what helps us to create uh, community. I had the opportunity to meet a couple of the new members of our school district that are coming for Santa Barbara, who actually happen to both be African American. So we're going to have two new assistant superintendents in Santa Barbara who are African American, one for pupil services, the other for elementaries, and amazing opportunity. But in sharing with them, I made the invitation for them to remember that there is an active and loving community here. So when people do come to our community, it is our responsibility to reach out and to act in love. That's another way to stand in that gap, is to reach out. People come, they're new, you see them, make an invitation. Hey, what do you need? How can I help you? Share what you have, share who you are, share. And so I hope that those new members of our community will begin to experience and feel love and feel that they could be connected here. Pretty scary thing in that stage of life, to take the answer and answer the call to come to a completely new community. Some of us have had the opportunity to bask in that same space forever, while others come. So how we help them and how we love is my call. And I hope that we will be a better community to be able to embrace and love and reach out to people. My question for you today, too, is to ask you about what grounds you in this call, what grounds your foundation. I think it's very difficult to answer a call to nonviolence if you don't have and you have not processed the violence that may have been a part of your own life and your own experiences. Nonviolence is not just physical. Nonviolence is in the words and deeds. It's in the thoughts. It's in the writing. Violence can be anywhere. Violence can be expressed in so many different levels and ways. And that call to nonviolence is asking you to think about dismantling it in every aspect of your own life. It was so fun to open this today and see a face here that I know, Dr. Robina Bhatti, who's on this call today. Good to see her. And many years ago in my young life, it was Dr. Bhatti who shared with me some thoughts around what is violence, and that violence itself can come in so many ways. And so the consciousness that I must express so that I am not acting in violence, and stopping myself to not act in violence of words, that which would dehumanize and dismantle others, that we have to come in a different way. Because let me tell you, you go on social media for 5 minutes and you see violence. It breaks my heart. It breaks my heart because I'm worried that our children have been so exposed to this level of violence that occurs everywhere for them. So asking our children, giving a time out to stand in that space. You have to be in that gap for them. You have got to stand in that space to help them to be able to filter that and to work through all of that violence. So in creating a community for love, what we're going to ask, if people are interested to be with us in NAACP, we're going to ask a few things. Show up. If you are here to seek justice, you can show up. Everything we do, we are going to question whether or not it is an act of love. To remember joy and to remember to equip yourself. My grandmother had a favorite phrase. She would say, go and assign yourself. You don't necessarily have to have somebody to tell you what to do. She would say, you see that thing that needs to be done? Assign yourself. I don't need to tell you that it needs to be done. You can assign yourself. We see those things that happen in our communities. We don't have to wait for other people to assign us. We can assign ourselves to be able to change that, to ask people to walk in a different way, to give love. We can assign ourselves. We don't have to wait for somebody, to wait for a hierarchical stance of leadership. No, everyday people, extraordinary things. That is the connection for me. This is one of my favorite quotes, and I'll wrap up with part of this quote. And it comes from Coretta Scott King, who, can you imagine where all of this would be without Sister Coretta? Because you know what? She had to stand in that tragic gap. She herself, can you imagine? It would have been the story of a leader assassinated and the tragedy of his life, but she kept this vision alive. She kept it alive for her children. She kept it alive for our nation. And so I always say, I really would love that holiday to be changed with both their names. That for me, I really would like to see that holiday changed, Martin and Coretta, really for me. But she said these words, and they always burn in my heart. The greatness of a community is most accurately measured by the compassionate acts of its members, a heart of grace, and a soul generated by love. And I always stand in that space with her, that my soul has been generated by love. And her love so powerfully stayed with us and helped us to become who we are. And what happened with that movement, that she herself was able to stand in that space and to give us what we needed, to give the love that would come forth. She stood in the gap. And for her, can you imagine a more tragic gap than actually physically sacrificing your beloved and having that? And yet standing in that space and knowing that it was she who was going to continue to bring forth what their children needed, continue to bring forth what the community itself was going to need. Every year after year, I would watch her in marches, always there in front, always there, never in tears, but in power and in love and in action. You didn't feel a mourning from her that was a separation, and how she did it, that she could still be in that space. Yet every year, I'm sure the mourning that happened, and even every day in the lives of her children, but she stayed here. And she reminds us that what people will ultimately know about us as a community is what is compassionate about us and whether or not we have a heart of grace and a soul that's deeply generated by love. So, my beloved community, if you want to join us, we welcome you to join what we do. But mostly I want to say to you on this beautiful, beautiful Freedom Day, may your heart be in a space that is generated through love. May your intention towards each other and community be in a space that comes in a place of love. Thank you. And I'll stop sharing my screen. Thank you, thank you. Oops. I think I lost my mouse here, folks. All right, David, I am And Diane, that is what I have to share this morning. And let's see.
Can you figure out how to unshare?
I'm doing it right now. I think my mouse is a little crazy.
All right.
You guys just go ahead and change me back then from, there we go.
All right. So, wow. Thank you so much. I'm just, again, taken aback with how much wisdom is in our community, and how you represent that. So I mean, in such a smooth way. You are suave, and you bring a spirit of calm, and so I appreciate that. And it's so appropriate for you to offer your invitation to everybody to join, who would like to join the NAACP effort. And it made me think of yesterday when we were out there at Freedom Plaza near Capitol. There's a significant amount of Black leadership with the Poor People's Campaign, and the most visible person is a Black person. But the people there were not majority Black by any stretch. I mean, of those 150,000 people, I would say probably, fewer than 20% were African American. And even though he's a preacher, we have people with no professed faith to, Muslims and Jews, all kinds of, people are represented. And so I just wanted to underscore your invitation that something can be Black led, and if you really want to be a part of it, you don't have to be apologetic about it. You don't have to, like that second song we had today, if you have to turn the lights out.
If that's what you need.
Yeah, because we need allies. We need solidarity with people. And so I think it's special. I think it's a great opportunity for everybody. Some of you got an email from me yesterday, to make the choice for solidarity with Blackness is revolutionary. It's a powerful thing. What could happen just in our region if everybody got with you, right?
Amen.
Because there are some things, I mean, we might be going along our merry way, but there are some things that need to be addressed and changed because people are being injured in our own community. People are being mistreated and cheated. And I heard a statement yesterday, I'm still trying to process. Somebody said, kill the system before the system kills you. I didn't want that to come. When I heard that, I thought, well, I don't want it to come off like, kill the people in the system. No, that's not what it's about. But we just need such change towards what you're talking about community. Can you speak to that?
How we are addressing the long-standing systematic institutionalized, yes. And so, I always think about the part that how we get rid of what is systemic is we have to acknowledge that it's there first, because we play games around that, nice words. We say, oh no, everything's fine. Oh no, that's not there. But we have to acknowledge that it's there first. And then we have to deconstruct and dismantle it with the appropriate action. I think that the gift that the NAACP has given us, it's been here for 109 years, is that their approach has always been to use the law. And we still, as an organization, use the law and introducing legislation to say, nope, this part we're going to wipe out, this part we're going to make sure that we replace it with that, because law has that ability to be used either way. Sometimes it's used on us, and sometimes it's used by us. And so we have a long-standing history of it being used on us, not necessarily by us. And so I appreciate that call within the NAACP to deal with and use law when appropriate. I love that about them. I love that about this organization.
Yes, I appreciate that too. And I mean, you got a legal defense fund going. We have, we have power, and so but we use it to uplift, not to crush, but to
That's right.
release.
That's right.
Somebody here might have something to add to, you're welcome to weigh in if you have a question or a thought or a prayer.
I do. I so want to thank you for this message, and like what you were saying, Pastor Moore, with that song and the inclusion. Can I sing this part? Here's the thing. It's so beautiful, the gap, the way you described that. No, we're not where we want to be, but we ain't where we were. And the beauty in that struggle, me and Pastor Moore have had this conversation many times, the sadness of George Floyd, but watching the unity of the peaceful protests that came afterwards. And they didn't just happen for a couple of days. They went on. And Black Lives Matter still goes on. And when a reporter comes to you and asks you, is this thing still happening? Are you kidding me? Are you clueless? This is more than this started way back when, and it's going to continue. And I love the fact, the invitation, because it's inclusion. And you know what? Like when you say allies, I've told Pastor Moore, white people will assume because I'm white that I kind of got their same mentality in certain realms. And it's kind of an eye opener for me, and it's disturbing when somebody approaches me in that manner, and I realize how far we need to go. But that's the gap, and there's beauty in that gap, because you know what? I can see where I don't want to be, and I can see where we're headed.
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
So I wanted
on there.
Yes. Normally I've held back whenever we have wonderful speakers, but Connie, I know you. This is so wonderful to see you. You're just as beautiful as I remember, and I wish we could meet much more often. However, I want to thank you for what I've always recognized in you, this wisdom, this smoothness, etc. But you brought a really wonderful message today. And when I see my kids later today, I will tell them that I got to see their Auntie Connie, and they always remember your humor as well. So thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Yes, give them my love, Maheen and Abner. Please give them my love.
I would like to thank you from the bottom of my heart for such a beautiful message, and also for a beautiful mission in life and career. And my question to you, you invite us to join in, you seek allies. What concretely, what can that look like? What can we, those of us who'd like to join you and support you, what can we do?
Well, thank you. I'll drop the membership form in the chat for you, so you can do that first. Become a member if you like. But I think in this community, when you hear the call, and I hope to make those calls more often out within our community, that people need support. We are in the space, Gateway and NAACP, where we are going to be doing more to support those who are parenting Black children. They need an enormous amount of support. And so that is some place, and I'm going to do some work around that in creating a parents council for them, but they need support and they need help. And frankly, we have to have funding to be able to do it. So NEACP is a 501c4, which means we don't have the same status as a 501c3 where, you get the quick tax, whatever, because we do legislative work. And so we will be doing more legislative work. I had a very beautiful conversation yesterday with our state senator, Monique Limon, around how we can maybe begin to support some changes in legislation that will specifically address the needs of our Black children, the needs for more protection for them. And so on a practical matter, you can join. You can, when you get the newsletter and you see a way that you can support, but just remember that everyday space of wherever you are, bringing about the questions as to whether or not this is impeding more violence towards Black people and Black bodies. Someone asked me, what is anti-Blackness the other day? you know, because we've heard that, and we've heard that call towards anti-Blackness and say, what is anti-Blackness? Well, let's talk about what the anti part, the part that gets to harm is. The part that gets to harm is this intrinsic thought that there's something wrong with Black people. That's what it is. A regular everything that says on every level, oh, there's something wrong with Black people. That the position there is not asset-based, but it's deficit-based. And so when you see that, call it out. When you see someone in that way, call it out. Hey, did y'all know that's anti-Black in there, what you just said? Hey, did you know what that, because it always positions itself in that way. So that's a simple thing, just where you are, to be able to call people to that and call and speak out, because we do. And you are, some of you are in spaces that we'll never be in. And you must be the carriers and the messengers to say, hey, no, not today. Nope, not today. Oh, Sister Chelsea's hand is up. Uh-oh.
No.
Thank you.
Mama Connie for, okay, I'll start my video. Sorry, I'm getting ready to go set up the NAACP booth, so I'm a little behind schedule.
Yes,
but
she's doing that so I could be here. Thank you.
Yes, I just want to love and appreciate you so much, not just for today, but for every day, for the way you show up. And Pastor Moore, I just want to thank you and Matt and the others that were at the Poor People Campaign, and that you shared that gift with us. I think this weekend, thinking about collective liberation, thinking about our folks in the margins and how our liberation is so inherently connected. We are so tied to one another, and that's what the beloved community is about. So Mama Connie knows, and Pastor Moore also knows, that my hope discipline has been a little bit challenged on the Central Coast lately. You know, thinking about how we can all come back together and heal some of the deep woundedness, especially in our activist community. And so I just appreciate the reminder of love and of just staying the course. So I just wanted to really provide appreciation for y'all. And if you come to the block party, please come and sign up for the NAACP. Provide your support in any way possible, because like I said, all of our liberation is tied to one another, and Black folks always show up for all of us every single time. And for the Poor People's Campaign stuff, Pastor Moore, I want to have a meeting with you and others to think about, like, what could a reparations campaign look like on the Central Coast, especially with all the cannabis revenue that's coming in. Connie, we've talked about this, thinking about especially the impact of Lompoc, right? So I think that's one tangible thing that maybe we can lead through the NAACP and PPC and other spaces. So I'm leaving now, but I just wanted to show love and appreciation. Love y'all.
Thank you. Love you, Chelsea.
Yay, Chelsea. You know, the Poor People's Campaign is largely responsible for the rise in awareness of Juneteenth over recent years. You know, back in the 1940s, I think it was, President Truman signed Freedom Day Act. You know, it wasn't made like a holiday or anything, but he was recognizing it. And so it was celebrated on February 1st back then, because that's the day that Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. Emancipation took place on January 1st of 1863. And so, you know, not everybody knew about it. And so that's why we have Juneteenth. But I just wanted to say that to show how much cachet the Poor People's Campaign has. We don't get as much of it on the West Coast, but on the East Coast and in the South, it's a huge thing. And so I appreciate what Chelsea was saying, because we do need to stretch this thing over to the West.
Absolutely. We can
put you and Chelsea in charge of that.
Oh, okay. Well, so Reverend Barber has forever been such an inspiration to me personally. And he took one of his sermons and they put it in a little tiny book, The Call for the Movement. And if you can grab that sometime, if I remember, I'll stick it in the chat here. It's just a tiny little book but it's one of the most powerful sermons I've ever read, and his call that way. And Reverend Barber, one of his folks that he hangs out with, is Barbara Williams Skinner. And Barbara actually had a big influence on my life when I was in my late 20s, early 30s, a friendship and a mentorship there. And so that's, again, how things get passed down the line, right? And so I remember seeing them kneeling. They got arrested in the Capitol for kneeling and praying in the Senate rotunda. And I looked up, and there it was, the New York Times, and it said, clergy arrested in the rotunda. And I looked, and it was Reverend Barber. It was Barbara Williams Skinner. It was our now Black senators from Georgia, our Black senator from Georgia. It was others. But again, in that space, and what they were trying to say was, we're coming to pray. And they got arrested for praying in that space. And I thought, oh, right, they're in to get some good trouble. I love this. Yeah. But always, always that way. And so, yes, we need to spread some love this way on the Central Coast about that campaign, because it moves us through race, right? Because it says, and Reverend Barber saying, we have to answer what has happened to poor white folks, and that they've been sold a bill of goods to believe something that harms them. And to go vote a certain way towards something that is actually harming them. And so, I believe it. Oh, yeah. So love him.
And before we have communion, let me just point out that Reverend Barber, some of you know that he's dealt with physical issues since he was in his late teens. He actually mentioned for a while, yesterday he mentioned that for a while he was surprised that he was still alive, because he is so immunocompromised, and so many people around him got COVID. I think 19 people in his church died, something like that. But he was, but then he said he changed the question and stopped asking, why am I still here? I mean, why am I still alive? And started asking, what can I do because I am alive? And I hope that all of us can take that to heart. Roy, would you go ahead and lead us in communion as we get ready to close?
So much. It was a dark reality for Jesus to have those whom he loved the most, those who were closest to him, betray him, turn their backs on him, walk away. And yet, as he sat there in that gap between that dark time and the possibilities before him, he took bread and he said, "This bread is my body, which I give to be broken for you. Take the bread and eat." After supper, he took the cup and he said, "This cup is the cup of the new covenant in my blood, poured out for you." He served it to his disciples. "Take and drink." Let us pray. Our God, we see, we feel what is. For all of us, we feel that boot on our necks, but some of us so much more severely than others. You have also given us a vision of what can be, what should be, what will be in your love. And you call us to stand in the gap and work towards what can, should, will be. We thank you for that vision. We thank you for that call. And we pray for the strength and the commitment to bridge the gap. We give you praise in the strong name of Jesus. Amen.
Thank you, Roy. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Connie. You're so lovable.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Right. I think we're going to close. Matt, you got it? That's not it. You're gonna go with that?
Talking about this train. This train is bound for glory. This train. This train bound for glory. This train. I tell you, this train is bound for glory. Only way you ride, you got to be holy. Talking about this train. This train, a clean train. This train. This train is a clean train. This train. I said this train. Everybody rides, you got to be the same. Oh, Lord, talking about this train. Hey, my God, my God, my God. Woo! Holy train. Hey, yes, Lord.
Hi, Siri.
Hey, Miss Diane, how you doing? Hey, Pastor.
Good. Well, Siri, we're going to take it away.
Oh, well, actually, we are not going to have the conversation today
Oh, okay.
because now here with us and Naomi is here, so we can do this. I mean, we can follow up and talk.
Oh, okay. All right. And Naomi's better. I know she was tired. There she is. Hi, Naomi. Oh,